Welcome back, coin hunters. What if that old nickel in your pocket was worth a fortune? Today, we're counting down the top 5 most valuable Jefferson Nickels, coins so rare they've sold for tens of thousands. Let's uncover the hidden treasures you might already own. Number 1. In the world of US coins, some of the most fascinating treasures are the ones hiding in plain sight. And among those, one nickel stands out, a quiet enigma that most people have never even heard of. It's not silver. It's not gold. But it carries a mystery so rare, collectors would pay thousands just to hold it. We're talking about the legendary 1964 Jefferson Nickel, but with a twist. This one has a D on the reverse. Now, most Jefferson Nickels from 1964 are incredibly common. In fact, the mint struck more nickels that year than almost any other time in history. Over 1 billion were produced between the Philadelphia and Denver mints. And here's the kicker: 1964 was the last year mint marks were placed on the reverse of the coin. Starting in 1968, they were moved to the obverse, right next to Jefferson's portrait. But what if I told you there's a version of this coin, minted in 1964, that defies logic? Let's zoom in. Most 1964 Jefferson Nickels follow the standard design: Thomas Jefferson's profile on the front, Monticello on the back. If it was minted in Philadelphia, there's no mint mark at all. If it came from Denver, you'll find a small D mint mark, positioned on the reverse, just to the right of Monticello. Here's where it gets interesting. Among the sea of common 1964 D nickels, a tiny handful show a peculiar trait. Their D mint mark doesn't quite match the others. These nickels display signs of something collectors call a repunched mint mark, or RPM. That means the original, D, was stamped twice, by hand, and not perfectly aligned. This wasn't done by machine. It was the work of a mint worker, back when mint marks were still manually punched onto each working die. One slip, one slight tilt, one moment of misalignment, and a rare variety is born. And then there's another layer of rarity: coins that have the D mint mark on the reverse, but something about the strike or design alignment is just off. It's faint, it's subtle, but for trained eyes, it's a sign that this coin is anything but ordinary. Now, why should that matter to anyone who's not a full-time coin expert? Because these little anomalies, these repunched or misplaced mint marks, turn an ordinary 5-cent coin into a collectible masterpiece. They're not just minting errors. They're windows into history. Proof that even in a mechanical world, human hands left their mark. Literally, over the years, collectors and graders began noticing a few 1964 D nickels that didn't belong in the common bin. They had sharper reliefs, stronger strikes, or curious doubling in the mint mark. Some had clear doubling on the Monticello building itself. Others had what's known as full steps, a feature at the base of Monticello that rarely survives heavy circulation. If you find a 1964 D Jefferson nickel with full, uninterrupted steps and a clear RPM, you're staring at a unicorn. But that's not all. There's also the possibility of transitional planchets, nickels accidentally struck on leftover silver blanks from earlier years. It's rare, but not impossible. Coin production in the 1960s was chaotic, with high demand, metal shortages, and sudden changes in minting practices. That opened the door for all kinds of mix-ups, some of which still turn up today. So how do you know if you've got one of these treasures? First, flip that nickel and look closely at the D mint mark. Use a jeweler's loupe or even a high-resolution photo. If the D looks doubled or slightly shifted, you might be looking at a repunched mint mark. Second, check Monticello. Are the steps crisp and fully visible? That's another key sign. And finally, weigh the coin. If it's lighter or heavier than it should be, it could be struck on a wrong planchet. Collectors chase these coins not just for their oddities, but for the thrill. It's like holding a piece of American history frozen in time, a coin that slipped through the cracks, defying the odds. So, if you ever come across a 1964 Jefferson nickel with a strange D on the reverse, don't just toss it in a jar, because one of these rare varieties has sold for as much as $67,000. Number 2. In the middle of a world at war, As soldiers fought overseas and Americans rationed food and metal at home, the U.S. Mint quietly made a bold and historic change, one that would forever impact the Jefferson nickel. The year was 1943. Materials were scarce, the future was uncertain, and every resource was precious. It was during this moment in time that a very special coin was born, the 1943 Jefferson Nickel, with a big, bold P mint mark right above Monticello on the reverse. At first glance, it might look like any other nickel. But look closer, and you'll notice something very different, something that makes this coin stand apart from almost every other nickel ever produced. You see, during World War II, nickel, the metal, was needed for weapons, tanks, and armor. It was simply too valuable to waste on coins. So the U.S. government made a decision. They changed the composition of the 5-cent piece. From 1942 to 1945, Jefferson nickels were no longer made of nickel at all. Instead, they were struck using a blend of 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese. That's right. These so-called nickels actually contain real silver, and to help distinguish them from the regular versions, the mint added something they had never done before: a huge mint mark directly above Monticello on the reverse of the coin. In the case of Philadelphia, this marked the very first time in U.S. history that the Philadelphia Mint placed its P on any coin. This was more than just a mint mark, it was a symbol of wartime sacrifice and innovation. These war nickels, as collectors call them, served a real purpose beyond commerce. And today, they carry a story that goes far beyond their face value. Now, the 1943 P. Jefferson Nickel is part of this special wartime series, and while millions were made, not all were created equal. Some came out with soft strikes, while others were accidentally struck on the wrong planchets. Some even displayed doubling on the lettering or Monticello, a prized error known as a doubled die. And then there are those few rare examples that have what's called full steps, a perfect, unbroken series of steps on the base of Monticello. These are almost impossible to find, especially on coins from this era. But there's more: the silver content in these nickels means they tarnish and age in a unique way. Over time, many develop rich tones, deep purples, soft golds, and ocean blues that dance across the surface. Collectors crave these naturally toned examples. Not only are they beautiful, but they're a reminder that even something as small as a nickel can carry the weight of history. So what makes the 1943 P stand out from the rest? It's that towering P mint mark, a wartime signature that's impossible to miss. It's the silver composition, a change brought on by necessity. It's the errors, the varieties, and the surprisingly high-grade examples that still surface from forgotten drawers, dusty jars, and old coin rolls. And here's the part every collector loves most: sometimes, you find one that seems too perfect, too sharp, too untouched for its age. The luster shines like it was minted yesterday. The steps are full. The strike is clean. These are the hidden gems, the ones that slipped through time without ever being spent, traded, or lost. They're the ones that cause jaws to drop at auctions. So if you've got an old nickel from 1943, don't ignore it. Flip it over. Look above Monticello. If you see that bold P, take a closer look. You might just be holding a slice of American history, one struck in silver, forged in wartime, and valued far beyond its humble beginnings, because one of these remarkable 1943 P. Jefferson nickels has sold for as much as $60,000. Number 3. Every now and then, a coin appears in the world of numismatics that turns heads, not because it's made of gold or struck in silver, but because of something far more elusive, a mystery hidden beneath layers of everyday change. And today, we're diving into one of those quiet marvels, the 1975 D. Jefferson Nickel. Now, at first glance, it doesn't look like much. In fact, most people wouldn't even give it a second thought. It's just a nickel, right? Thomas Jefferson's familiar profile on the front, Monticello standing proud on the back, with that tiny D tucked neatly to the right of the building. Another pocket coin from the Denver Mint. But here's where things get interesting, because buried among the millions of nickels struck in 1975, There are a handful that defy the rules. To understand why the 1975 Jefferson Nickel matters, we need to understand what was happening behind the scenes. By the mid-1970s, the U.S. Mint had fully modernized. Coin production was efficient, streamlined, and highly automated. Mistakes were supposed to be rare. Yet, even in this modern era, the minting process was still vulnerable to small human errors. And those are the kinds of errors that collectors dream of. Some 1975 nickels were struck using worn or misaligned dies, resulting in weak details or doubling on the reverse lettering. Others show signs of overpolished dies, which can erase key details like the steps of Monticello. And in a few extremely rare cases, collectors have discovered 1975 nickels with full steps, every single stair carved sharply and cleanly, from left to right. For a coin from this year in mint, that's an incredibly rare sight. But the real magic happens when something goes truly off-script. Take for example the off-center strikes, coins where Jefferson's face is awkwardly shifted, almost peeking off the edge. Or those struck on the wrong planchet, like a dime blank, making the nickel smaller, lighter, and wildly out of place. These are the types of errors that transform an ordinary coin into a prize. The Denver Mint, known for producing high volumes, wasn't immune to such anomalies. And because 1975 wasn't a transitional year, no major composition changes, no redesigns, any mistake made during that time tends to stand out even more. It wasn't expected. Which makes the surprises all the more valuable. Let's not forget about die cracks and cuds, chunks of metal that form on the coin due to damaged dies. These little scars can run across Monticello or slice through the date. Some collectors actively hunt for these signs, because each one is unique. One of a kind. A fingerprint from the minting floor. So, why do these coins matter to collectors today? Because the 1975 Jefferson Nickel is one of those modern coins that proves rarity doesn't always come from age. It can come from precision. From flaw. From being in the right place at the right time, when a minting machine hiccups and history is made. And because it's recent enough to still be in circulation, people are checking their change and pulling out every 1975 nickel they can find, hoping to stumble across something special. Now imagine this. You're sifting through an old jar of coins, the kind that's been sitting in a drawer for decades. You spot a nickel from 1975, the Denver Mint mark gleaming softly. You flip it over, and something feels different. Maybe the steps are flawless. Maybe the strike is just a little off-center. Maybe there's a subtle error that catches your eye. That one coin, that one forgotten piece of change, could be the key to a collector's dream, because one rare and perfectly preserved 1975 Monticello Jefferson Nickel has sold for as much as $57,000. Number 4. There's a quiet kind of treasure hiding in the world of U.S. coins. Not the kind that glitters with gold or glows with silver, but the kind that slips unnoticed through your hands every day. And one of the most fascinating examples of this hidden treasure is the 1971 Jefferson Nickel. At first glance, it seems ordinary. You've seen it 100 times. Thomas Jefferson staring off to the left, his gaze steady and calm. On the back, the classic Monticello, centered and strong, with a small D mint mark to the right of the dome, showing it was struck in Denver. Common, right? Not so fast, because among the millions, yes, millions, of nickels produced in Denver that year, a select few have stunned collectors with their oddities, their precision, and their jaw-dropping value. Let's start with the basics. The 1971 Jefferson Nickel was struck using the standard copper-nickel composition, a reliable mix that had been in place since the silver content was removed from U.S. coins. The Denver Mint pushed out hundreds of millions of these nickels in 1971. But just because a coin is common doesn't mean it can't be special. Errors. That's where the story begins. Some of these nickels were struck with dies that were misaligned, creating a coin that's off-center, sometimes just slightly, other times dramatically, with Jefferson's face creeping toward the rim, or even partially missing. These kinds of errors are rare, especially in coins from the 1970s when the minting process was becoming more refined, but the real magic is in the details, specifically, in what collectors call full steps. At the base of Monticello are a series of steps. On most coins, these steps are blurry or worn, even at the moment of striking. But a true full steps Jefferson Nickel shows 5 or 6 perfectly defined steps. These are incredibly hard to find on coins from 1971, and even more difficult when they come from the Denver Mint, which was focused more on quantity than quality. Now let's talk about die varieties. Some 1971D nickels show signs of doubling in the lettering, especially on the reverse. That's known as doubling or doubled dies, and it's one of the most sought-after types of mint errors. Imagine seeing Monticello, or 5 cents, appear slightly doubled, like a shadow beneath the letters. That tiny flaw makes the coin a hot item for collectors. There are even rumors among seasoned collectors about a small number of 1971D nickels being struck on the wrong planchet, like a dime planchet, which would make the coin smaller and thinner than it should be. These are extremely rare and often go unnoticed for years, hiding in collections, waiting to be discovered. And here's the wild part: many of these valuable nickels aren't sitting behind glass in a museum or protected in high-end auctions. They're out there, floating in circulation, sitting in jars, resting in drawers, waiting in bank rolls. That's why collectors never stop looking. Because sometimes that one special coin, the one with perfect steps, or a doubled die, or a minting error you can barely believe, can be found right where you'd least expect it. So, what should you look for? Check for sharp, full steps on Monticello. Examine the coin for any signs of doubling on the letters or date. Look at the rims. Are they even? Are they centered? Weigh the coin. If it feels lighter than normal, you may have something struck on the wrong planchet. Even the slightest oddity could be a signal that you're holding a rare piece of American minting history. And here's the part that makes every coin hunter's heart race. One rare variety of the 1971D Jefferson Nickel, preserved in stunning condition, with full steps and error features, has been known to sell for as much as $20,000. And in a truly remarkable case, another example reached a record-smashing price of $120,000. Number 5. Every so often, a coin emerges from the shadows of pocket change and reveals a story far greater than its face value. Today, we turn our attention to one such hidden gem, the 1972 Jefferson Nickel. No mint mark. No silver. No flashy design changes. Just a simple 5-cent piece with a secret waiting to be discovered. Let's be honest, on the surface, the 1972 Jefferson Nickel doesn't scream rare. It looks just like every other nickel minted in the 70s. On the obverse, we see Thomas Jefferson's stoic profile. On the reverse, Monticello stands proudly, an iconic symbol of American architecture and Jefferson's legacy. But behind that familiar design lies a surprising truth. Some of these nickels are worth far more than anyone would imagine. To understand why, you have to look closer. Much closer. In 1972, the Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of nickels. That's a lot of coins, and most of them were made quickly, using high-speed presses and dies that wore down fast. This mass production created inconsistencies, tiny imperfections and striking flaws that collectors today seek out like buried treasure. The first thing to look for? Full steps. At the base of Monticello are 5 or 6 horizontal steps. On most nickels, they're blurry or worn, even from the moment they were minted. But in rare cases, the strike was so crisp, so clean, that every step is perfectly visible. These are called full steps Jefferson nickels, and for 1972, they're incredibly hard to find. The dies were old. The pressure was uneven. Finding a 1972 nickel with full steps is like discovering a 4-leaf clover in a field of weeds. But that's just the beginning. Some 1972 nickels were struck using misaligned dies, creating off-center errors that are immediately noticeable. Others show what collectors call die cracks or cuds, raised lines or blobs of metal caused by broken dies. These imperfections, far from ruining the coin, actually make them more desirable. Each one is unique. No two are exactly alike, and then there are the doubled dies. Occasionally, a die would shift slightly during production, causing the letters or numbers to appear doubled. On the 1972 Jefferson Nickel, Doubling has been spotted on the reverse inscriptions, words like Monticello or 5 cents, showing a ghost-like second impression. These doubled dies are some of the most exciting discoveries in modern coin collecting, and when paired with high-grade preservation, they can turn an ordinary nickel into a 5-figure find. Now, why would a coin like this survive in perfect condition? Simple. Sometimes coins are never spent. They go straight from the mint into a collection, a bankroll, or a drawer. They sit for decades untouched by time, while others wear down in circulation. These untouched coins, especially with sharp details and rare features, are the ones that grab headlines at auction houses. So what should you look for in a 1972 Jefferson Nickel? Check for the presence of full steps. Examine the coin for doubling on the reverse. Look at the edges. Are they even? Are there unusual marks, cracks, or raised lines? Weigh the coin if you can. Planchet errors occasionally occur, where the wrong metal was used. Any of these signs could mean you're holding something far more valuable than 5 cents. And the beauty of it all? These coins are still out there. In change jars. In old rolls. In collections passed down from parents and grandparents. That's what makes the hunt so exciting. You never know where the next valuable nickel might show up, because one extraordinary example of the 1972 Monticello Jefferson Nickel, with razor-sharp details and full steps, once sold for an incredible $48,000.